wonderful story if that's where the story ended. You know, David, King David, is there anyone from the house of Saul still alive? Bring him in. I want to show him God's kindness. Here comes Mephibosheth. He's crippled in both legs. Pull up a chair. And it lives happily ever after. But that's not how the story ends. If you go to 2 Samuel chapter 16, Mephibosheth decides to walk away from the table. Not just physically, but also physically. He pushes himself away from the table. Pushes himself away from the food what's being presented to him. Pushes himself away from the relationship. Pushes himself away from the intimacy. He pushes himself away. How so? King David had reached a point in his reign, one of the lowest points of his life. People were threatening him to take his kingdom. And so what do we do when we get depressed? What do we do when we get down? We withdraw. It's not the best idea, it's the worst idea, but we withdraw. And so he gets on a horse and he just starts riding off. I guess they're taking my kingdom. Have you ever had a bad moment and you think you're going to lose everything? And then you look back on it and you're like, what a knucklehead. He's gone. Where's King David? He left. He's given up the kingdom. The devil said he's coming, he's leaving, everything's gone. All of a sudden, Ziba goes to the kitchen and pulls out bread and sandwich meats and wine, gets on his horse, catches up to King David, catches up, and he says, hey, I brought you some food. David looks at Ziba and goes, man, thank you. Tell me, how's Mephibosheth doing? You're not going to believe this. I'm sorry to tell you. He's trying to take over your kingdom. He's sitting on your throne, in your throne room, and he's ruling your servants around, and he's beginning to build and rally people around him that's going to vote him in and anoint him to be king. And David looks at him, are you serious? He was my son. We drank together. We ate together. This is my son. I know, I'm sorry. See, what happened with Mephibosheth is all of a sudden the intimacy got trumped with personal ambition. Personal ambition. If we can remember anything today, the ambition of a man will push himself away from God. You got to be so careful. There's a fine line between needs and wants. There's a fine line. Because once, have we all lived enough life to know that more always wants more, and more wants more and wants more, and we never have enough. None of us ever have enough. I can promise you, if someone put $1 million in your bank account, you would say in a matter of time, that's not enough. And I know what you're thinking. Let's try. I'd like to try. Just let me try. We always want more. And all of a sudden, Mephibosheth pushes himself away from the table of relationship, the table of intimacy. They laughed together. They cried together. They walked each other back to the rooms after dinner. He pushed them on wheels. He probably picked them up. The king picked them up. And all of a sudden, gone. Pushed himself away from the table. If I could implore you, regardless of how busy that world gets. See, outside of this sanctuary, it's crazy. Inside of the sanctuary, it's peaceful. Why is that? In Psalms 26, verse 8, he says, I love to come to the sanctuary of God because it's where his presence dwells. But when you get on Highway 45, Highway 59, Beltway 8, 610, it's hard to find God out there. Are you with me? Say yes. It's hard to find God out there. And when everybody's yelling in the office and chaos, it's hard to find God. But when you pull yourself up to the table you begin to experience them regardless of where you're at. So you're saying to yourself, practically speaking, Frankie, talk to me. Talk practical. I see the parallels. I see what you did with the story. I see it. Practically, how do you pull yourself up to the table? I'm so glad you asked. I'm so glad you asked. Pulling yourself up to the table is a place of intimacy with God. And how do you get intimate with God like that? You become aware of his presence around you. You just take that moment and you're like, God is here. The moment you do that, you have sat at the table. You are aware of his presence. That is so critical. Because we can live our whole week, a whole month, a whole year, and walk into room, into room, into room, into car, into restaurant, and never be aware that we are literally walking in the presence of God. The way we walk in oxygen is the way we're walking in the presence of God. In Acts chapter 17, verse 28, it says, in him we live and breathe and find our being. We are in his presence. And the moment we become aware, we have now pulled ourselves up to the table. And then when we begin to communicate, we begin to spark intimacy with God. Simple things. Simple things. Smith Wigglesworth once said this, I don't always pray an hour a day, but an hour doesn't go by without praying. You're always aware of his presence, and you're always praying. And the moment we stop being aware, and the moment we stop talking, is the moment we begin to step away from the table to engage in other aspects of our life. We've got to become a person who never leaves the table and learn how to live our life from the table. We're in meetings, but we're still at the table. We're in the car, but we're still at the table. We are cooking, we're still at the table. We are always at the table. We never leave the table. When you're sleeping, before your eyes open up, you're at the table. You're aware of them, you're talking with them. You never, ever leave the table. Are you with me? Put your hands together for that. Never. Never leave the table. I've known some people that sat at the table, they walked away from the table, and they walked away for so long, they forgot how beautiful the table is. They forgot how wonderful it is. And then they begin to doubt what they once felt because they've been away so long. I want to tell you, your seat at the table, it's always available. And when you sit down, and every single one of you this Sunday morning, you worshiped him, you are sitting at the table right now. Don't ever stand up. Don't ever walk away. Do you receive that? Come on, put your hands together one more time. I'm going to play a video for you right now, and I'll tell you why. I love seeing the results of staying at the table. When you are constantly aware of him, you're constantly talking to him, you become just like your Father. You begin to think like him. You begin to talk like him. In John chapter 14, verse 12, it says, anyone who believes in me will do the things I have done. The things. What things? All those things. All those things you're thinking about that Jesus did, we are to do. But we got to sit at the table. We got to stay aware. We got to keep praying. I was washing the dishes the other night. A couple weeks ago, this moment happened. I was washing the dishes, and I was like, God, I want you to wash me like this. You stay at the table. The more you do that, the more his fruits, his gifts begin to flow out of your life. And that's when you begin to see people that you love, instead of wanting them to have a good life, you see them have a good life as a result of your presence, because you're at the table. You're talking with God. And when you pray with them and you pray for them, things happen. Things happen. Things happen.
If you like that video, take a second and click the subscribe button as well as the notification bell. This way you'll always know every time we've uploaded a new video.